Welcome to Tibet This Week, where we bring you weekly news edition on His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Tibet, and the Central Tibetan Administration. These are the headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama arrives in Ladakh. The world celebrates as His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama turns 90. His Holiness the Dalai Lama affirms the continuation of the institution of the Dalai Lama at the 15th Tibetan Religious Conference. Sikyong concludes official visit to Australia. The 3rd Tibet Youth Forum concludes. Core Group for Tibetan Cause India concludes annual meeting. Tibet Policy Institute and Sangay Kyab Chinese liaison officers spoke on the succession of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Tibetan representatives addresses United Nations Human Rights Council's site event. Last Sunday, His Holiness the Dalai Lama arrived in Ladakh, where he was warmly received by spiritual heads, leaders of several associations, and thousands of people from all age groups. Upon arriving at the Shivasel Palace, His Holiness's residence in Leh Ladakh, His Holiness addressed the monks, nuns, and lay people who have gathered there for his welcome. His Holiness emphasized on the value of Buddhist tradition, especially the dialectical debate, which is purely based on logic and reasoning, and that Tibetan Buddhism can withstand any rigorous test. On July 6, 2025, at Tekjin Chuling Monastery in Dharamsala, His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama graciously joined thousands of devotees, followers, well-wishers, and over 200 media personnel from around the world to celebrate his 90th birthday. The celebration, organized by the Ghoton Organizing Committee of the Central Tibetan Administration, saw the presence of Chief Guest Rajiv Ranjan Singh, Minister of Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairying, and Kiran Rijiju, the Union Minister of the Parliamentary Affairs from the Government of India, along with guest of honor, Chief Minister Pema Khandu, Government of Arunachal Pradesh, and Minister of Sikkim's Ecclesiastical Affairs, Sonam Lama, Government of Sikkim, as well as special guest, Chief Executive Councillor Teshe Gyaltsen, Ladakh Autonomous Hill Development Council, and Richard Gere, Board Chairman of the International Campaign for Tibet. Several other dignitaries, including the Ambassador of the Czech Republic to India, members from the US State Department and Embassy in India, dignitaries from Italy and Sri Lanka, a group of Chinese friends from Taiwan joined the celebration as well. Also in attendance were the Central Tibetan Administration's leadership and heads and scholars of Tibetan Buddhism. A wide array of magnanimous performances, predominantly from Southeast Asia and from around the world, were performed joyously. His Holiness in his address thanked everyone for celebrating his 90th birthday and advised everyone to practice warm-heartedness and emptiness. Sikyong Pemba Tsering of the Central Tibetan Administration, in his introductory remarks, welcomed, acknowledged, and expressed sincere gratitude to all the distinguished guests and thousands other attendees for attending the celebration, and thanked celebrants around the world. Speaker Khenpo Sonam Tempe of the Tibetan Parliament in Exile read the official statement of the Tibetan Parliament for the occasion. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, Marco Rubio, U.S. Secretary of State, Lai Ching-te, President of Taiwan, former Presidents of the United States, Bill Clinton, George Washington Bush, and Barack Obama also sent birthday greetings. Tibetans and non-Tibetans around the world also rejoiced in the celebration of the 90th birthday of His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama. The officers of Tibet and Tibetan communities in Switzerland, Mongolia, Belgium, Austria, UK, Japan, Taipei, Italy, Korea, Australia, United States, France, Germany, Czech and Hungary, and Tibetan settlement offices in India, Nepal and Bhutan all organized grand celebrations through cultural performances, book launch, photo exhibitions, movie screenings, inviting lawmakers, members of parliament, ambassadors, and other dignitaries of their respective host countries. Along with grand birthday celebration on July 6, departments of the Central Tibetan Administration continued celebrating the Year of Compassion through cultural performances, live art exhibition, film festival, health camp, and exhibitions here in Dharamsala. His Holiness the Dalai Lama also attended a lifelong prayer offered by the Central Tibetan Administration on July 5, 2025, and a 90th birthday celebration organized by Tibet Province on 30th June 2025. Days later, His Holiness the Dalai Lama issued a thank you letter to everyone who has sent greetings and celebrated his birthday. In the letter, His Holiness noted that he has dedicated his entire life to spread the message of compassion and kindness and has invited his followers to join him on this journey. At the inaugural ceremony of the 15th Tibetan Religious Conference on July 2, 2025, His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama read an official statement affirming the continuation of the institution of the Dalai Lama. From the statement, His Holiness highlighted that over the last several years, Tibetans from inside Tibet and people from all over the world have requested for the institution of the Dalai Lama to continue, and therefore His Holiness has affirmed that the institution will continue. With that, His Holiness the Dalai Lama reiterated that the sole authority to recognize the future reincarnation rests exclusively with Kande Potang Trust, the office of the Dalai Lama. The 15th Tibetan Religious Conference ran from 2nd to 4th July for 3 days here in Dharamsala. The conference was organized by the Department of Religion and Culture, Central Tibetan Administration, and was attended by a total of 115 abbots, chugus, and monastery representatives. The conference attendees unanimously drafted 3 resolutions pledging to uphold and collectively join efforts in fulfilling long aspirations of His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama. Human rights ambassadors from 7 countries issued a joint statement rejecting any external interference on the matter concerning the reincarnation of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Likewise, 34 members of the European Parliament from 4 major political groups have called on China to respect religious freedom of Tibetan Buddhists. Last Wednesday, Sikyong Pembasring of the Central Tibetan Administration embarked on a week-long official tour to Australia. Over the course of the week, Sikyong met and addressed the Tibetan community of Melbourne, Canberra, Queensland, Newcastle, South Coast Nowra, visited Tibetan Language Centre in Sydney, visited Langrit Sangba Centre, and spoke to the members of the Voluntary Tibetan Advocacy Group of Australia. At these gatherings, Sikyong highlighted the need for unity within the Tibetan diaspora, significance of celebrating His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama's 90th birthday, discussed Tibetan movement and global political shifts, ongoing efforts of the CTA and 16th Kashak to advocate for Tibet's political and cultural interest on the international platform, middle way approach as the path forward, and encouraged the younger generation to study Tibetan history. During this visit, Sikyong also attended the 90th birthday celebration of His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama at the New South Wales Parliament hosted by Liz Jones, and sat down for an interview with ABC Studios, Sydney, and the Australian Associated Press in Canberra. The timing of the interview with ABC Studios was particularly significant with Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's visit to China shortly thereafter. Sikyong called on the Prime Minister to express interest in visiting Tibet in order to get a first-hand experience of the struggles of Tibetans living inside Tibet. The Tibet Advocacy Section under the Department of Information and International Relations, Central Tibetan Administration, held the 3rd International Tibet Youth Forum from July 3rd to 5th in Dharamsala, bringing over 95 Tibetan youth from over 15 countries. This year's forum saw prominent speakers like Richard Gere, chairman of the International Campaign for Tibet, Jejun Pema, former minister of CTA and former president of Tibetan Children's Village School, and Lobsang Jimba, secretary of the Office of the Dalai Lama. Speakers commonly emphasized on the role of the Tibetan youth to collectively advocate for Tibet in their host countries and to take the just cause of Tibet forward on global stage. Speaker Kimbus Nam Tempe of the Tibetan Parliament in Exile and Sikyong Pembasring also graced the youth forum and addressed a wide range of questions from the participants. 34 from the 95 participants of the 3rd International Tibet Youth Forum further attended a week-long summer immersion program seeking to strengthen the participants' understanding of Tibetan identity, culture, and the ongoing freedom movement. The program was organized by Tibet Advocacy Section in collaboration with the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives. Last Sunday, the core group for Tibetan Cause India convened their meeting at the Bureau Office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, New Delhi, facilitated by India-Tibet Coordination Office. The meeting brought together 13 core group members and 2 special invitees, Jigme Chugne, representative at the Bureau Office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Tenzin Lekshe, Additional Secretary at Department of Information and International Relations, Central Tibetan Administration. Representative Jigme Chugne also attended the Bharat Tibetan Sayuk Manch National Council meeting in New Delhi, witnessing more than 150 executive members from 22 states. Jigme Chugne in his address at the gathering spoke on how this organization has stood as a bridge between the people of India and Tibet for nearly 26 years. Last Friday, China Action, a US-based non-governmental organization, hosted an online discussion via Platform X on the topic His Holiness the Dalai Lama's succession and who should recognize the future reincarnation, featuring Dawat Sring, director of the Tibet Policy Institute of Central Tibetan Administration, Sangay Kyab, Chinese liaison officer for the European countries, and Chinese-speaking scholars. Dawat Sring spoke on His Holiness the Dalai Lama's statement on his reincarnation. Meanwhile, Sangay Kyab refuted Chinese government's narrative presented at the 2 UN side events, asserting claims of Beijing's legal authority over choosing the next Dalai Lama. Representative Tibettv of the Tibet Bureau, Geneva, along with member of the 17th Tibetan Parliament in Exile, Dojitside, and Tibetan activist Chimi Lhamo, attended a side event during the 59th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council with participants from 27 countries. Tibettv addressed the topic of Tibetan Buddhism and the freedom of religious belief. The team also took part in a 2-day closed-door meeting with the permanent representative to the UNHRC, special rapporteurs, and the staff of the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights. Representative Tibettv also spoke at a panel discussion in Geneva on understanding and resisting transnational repression. She spoke on the grim reality of transnational repression on Tibetans and how Tibetan representatives have been a target of surveillance even in a country like Switzerland, renowned for its security. That is all for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. See you next week.